Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening. Wherever you might be joining us today, we're very excited to have you here for our very special webinar today on using DevOps tools to achieve continuous integration. My name is Cameron Norrie. I'm a Racker here at Rackspace, and I'm really excited to have you and join our two DevOps experts who are going to be sharing their knowledge and insights with you today. We've got plenty of time to answer any questions you have, so please be sure to type in any questions you might have into the chat box that you see on your screen. We'll have special moderators joining us today to answer questions in the chat box, both in Spanish, Portuguese, and of course, English. So without further ado, we're going to go ahead and kick things off. I'd like to go ahead and welcome Kyle Kelly and Ryan Richard. Kyle and Ryan are both DevOps engineers working day in and day out with customers here at Rackspace who have chosen our DevOps automation service. They actually help customers automate the process of deploying and scaling their applications. So to kick things off with us today, I'm going to turn the presentation over to Kyle. Kyle.
Hey all, good to hear from you all today. I'm Kyle Kelly, again, Developer Support Engineer at Rackspace, and we'll be digging a bit into the DevOps Automation Service and answering some questions at the end. Before we even go there, we're going to a little bit of precursor. We're all building similar systems using the same web frameworks and databases. These all get configured in similar ways with accepted best practices. We've got varying traffic loads, security, your own developer sanity, and what we really want is more time developing applications, serving customers, and building our businesses. So let's keep deploying then. Hey, let's keep pushing features out continuously. Let's keep delivering. How do we get there? Well, we know we need to write tests. We need to use continuous integration. We need to keep running our tests. You want to use version control, particularly Git. And check that code in somewhere. It could be GitHub, it could be Bitbucket, it could be your own GitLab. Get good coverage on that app. And you want to test everything. You can test your app, test your environment, test your system. You're not always going to be perfect, but you need to go for as much coverage as you can. Because if you don't, what ends up happening? Well, downtime. And everyone's waiting. Managers are waiting, customers are waiting. Just generally, people are waiting. We have to minimize it. I mean, downtime is going to happen. Sucks. When it happens, you end up climbing through the ventilation shafts of your systems, trying to hunt down some elusive bug in production. Did we run out of memory? Did the process die and supervisor couldn't bring it back up? So once you figure it out and fix it, you get accolades for being the one. Adrenaline hit you. You were in ops mode. Life is good. Burnout will quickly happen. And we've all been there. Honestly, I was there last week, even for a system managed well by SaltStack. No matter what, downtime is going to happen. You should assume that failure is going to happen. Have a rollback strategy. But let's say you're not even at that state yet. How do you run your tests? Well, if you need a bare minimum testing setup, use Travis CI. If you have just private repos, it's no problem there either. Use Travis Pro. Travis has post-build actions, will track your builds, tracks your branches, and it'll track your pull requests, and you'll get the overall history of your entire repository over time. Setting up Travis is pretty simple. You declare a language that you're going to work with. They have their own cookbooks that they're building from to set up your environment. They do the installation. You set up your install. You say what scripts you want to run. You can even do post-build actions, hit other webhooks, lots of great stuff. And configuring is really simple. You go to travisci.org, configure your account to use it. You can use it on organizational accounts or user accounts. And then you just enable the repos that you want. But if you need more power, you've got your own environment that you want to deploy. Like you want to deploy your entire infrastructure again. When you make some big change, you can do that. Use Jenkins. Jenkins allows you to really get fine-grained control, has tons of plugins to do all sorts of different things. It's great. DevOps is hard. Maybe hard is not the right word, but it certainly hurts when you're trying to do development and and you have to do all this config management stuff to get your systems up and running and wait for the build times and everything else.
So before we go any further, I'd like to pose this question to the entire group. If you could, go ahead and select if you're using one form of the config management on here, that'd be great. We'll just take about a minute to let that happen. We're just waiting to see. Total response is almost up to 200. So I just really want to get a feeling for what the response is. So in case you can't see it, it looks like right now Chef is the top winner, followed by Puppet. A smaller amount of Ansible and SaltStack, which makes sense, due to their relatively newcomers on the scene. There's over 100 people not using config management at all, and a few more on other. So it's interesting. Thanks for your responses there. So my name is Ryan Richard. I'm going to follow Kyle, and I'm the team lead of the DevOps Automation Service. I've been a Racker for almost 7 years and have been very involved in helping customers run their infrastructure. And one thing that our team does is we essentially help run infrastructure on the cloud, on dedicated, on private cloud, with using automation tools like Chef to help customers become more flexible and become more essentially elastic in nature, right? And so the tool of our choice currently is Chef. Our team uses Chef extremely heavily in practice right now, and what I wanted to provide for the remainder of this webinar was some very practical examples on how our team is using CI methodologies that Kyle was talking about, and how we're using these methodologies for our Chef cookbooks, and how we're bringing those to customers. And we'll even talk a little bit about testing your Chef-powered infrastructure if you're using Chef. Now, a lot of the tools that are mentioned are specific to Chef, but the ideas could be taken to any of the other config management systems that were mentioned earlier. So one of the really important things to note here is our team is currently managing over 50 cookbooks. 50% of them have been rewritten to enforce testing. One of our main goals of our team is enforcing consistency and testing, which, to be honest, the community has had a hard time doing, over the last couple years. And finally, if you're ever interested in looking at our Chef cookbooks, you can go to github.com/rackspace-cookbooks, and we can provide that link in the chat as well. So to get started, my team uses Jenkins extremely heavily. We use essentially the number of plugins for Jenkins to connect to GitHub, to connect to other open source tools. And we essentially are treating our Chef cookbooks as actual code. Chef is an extension on Ruby, so we treat our cookbooks as code, and we test them in Jenkins with jobs, much like you would your own application. We use GitHub. We'll configure Jenkins to listen for webhooks presented from GitHub for pull requests. So anytime someone makes a change to our Chef cookbooks, we'll automatically fire off essentially a job in Jenkins, which will do the following. Jenkins will call. Make sure you guys have the next slide. Jenkins will call a tool called Rake, and Rake for us is essentially a workflow of Ruby, written in Ruby, but it's basically a workflow that does 3 or 4 primary things. The first thing Rake's going to do is call Rubocop. Rubocop is syntax checking for your Ruby code. And this is really important, especially in the Chef world, because we found that a lot of Chef cookbooks support the Ruby 1.8 syntax, not, say, the Ruby 1.9 syntax, which it really should. And so we've been going through and actually fixing this for all of our cookbooks, because much like if you were writing a Python app, you would want to make sure that if you were writing to Python 2.7, that your code supported Python 2.7. If you were writing to Python 3, you'll want to make sure your code supports Python 3. And as Kyle's slide a little while ago showed, we're trying to get to 100% unit testing, and tools like RuboCop help that. The next tool in the tool chain that's common for Chef is Food Critic. Food Critic is a Chef linter. It will essentially make sure that you're following the best of practice, the community-driven best of practices for Chef, right? To make sure you're not doing anything too crazy. Because Chef ultimately is extremely powerful, and you can pretty much do anything you want, but it doesn't always make it a good idea to just, call Ruby everywhere. So Chef Spec is the next tool in the tool chain. Chef Spec is an extension on RSpec, which makes sure that you're calling your Chef resources as you expect. It's an in-memory unit testing framework. Again, very specific to Chef, but it's going to assert that your code and your code logic is doing what you expect it to do. It's not actually laying the code down, but it is asserting certain conditions are met, within your logic. And again, this gets back to Kyle's slide earlier, which is this is where you might want to try and reach 100% unit testing coverage if you can get there. So the last item, which is probably the most interesting, is a tool called Test Kitchen. Test Kitchen, in our world, it will actually spin up a Rackspace cloud server, apply the Chef cookbook to that cloud server, and then we'll use a library called ServerSpec to make sure that server is doing what we expect it to do. And this is not in memory. This is real time. We'll call the Rackspace cloud and actually provision machines. And ServerSpec will say, I'm expecting Apache to be running. I'm expecting it to be listening on port 80. I'm expecting it to be enabled as a service, and I can assert those things with functional testing because I'm actually checking a real system with a real Chef cookbook applied to it. And then the final steps for our team is we use a tool called Thor. It's another Ruby gem, but it does our post-build step, and for us that is tag the Git branch or tag the branch with the current version of the Chef cookbook. So we always have a real-time tag that matches the Chef version, the cookbook version, excuse me. And then our final step is always a human process to actually go and do a code review, make sure everything looks good before we merge it in. So I would like to just kick out to one more poll real quick and see how many people are testing their infrastructure even to this level, right? So performing testing on your infrastructure. We'll just let this go for another 10 or 15 seconds, 20 seconds perhaps. Great, so we'll probably go and end that there. Let me close this poll. So that's quite an apparent difference, right? And I think that's what that shows us is how difficult and time-consuming this process actually is, right? I would assume anyone who's really tried this, or even the 12%ers who are doing this out of everyone in the audience would say that this is a very time-consuming and difficult process. It's something that my team does inherently because we're providing a service to customers, and we have to make sure that our code works. Thank you for your participation in that. So one thing that you might be saying is, okay, great, you've told me how to make sure my Apache cookbook is testing, make sure Apache is doing what it's supposed to do, or making sure Nginx is doing what it's supposed to do. But what I really care about is what I really care about is my application, right? So how do I get my application onto one of these machines? How do I get my application deployed and tested? Well, we can follow a lot of the same methodologies that we talked about, but there's really two modes of application delivery in the Chef world. There's a few more that are a little bit more exotic, but we're going to focus on two very, very common ones. The first one is this idea called a application cookbook. An application cookbook was popularized by the guys at Riot who wrote a tool called Bookshelf. And it's basically a cookbook whose sole job is to do anything needed to deploy an application or your application. And this is a very, very chef-specific concept. But my example that I have on the slide is actually a tool that my team uses. We maintain our own webhook for monitoring events, and we maintain an application cookbook for that webhook. And inside that cookbook, I'm not actually building in support for Python, Supervisor, or Mongo. What I'm doing is I'm importing other cookbooks to do the heavy lifting for me, but I'm essentially maintaining a wrapper cookbook. And what I'm doing in my cookbook is doing things like I'm making sure all of my Python dependencies are installed because that's specific to my application. I need Python as a runtime available. Our software doesn't have a init, it doesn't have any way of running itself, so we use a tool called Supervisor D to make sure that the service is running. And finally, it requires a local Mongo database, so we install that. And basically, like with the webhook, when we want to deploy a new version of the webhook, I can go through the entire tool chain I just mentioned, and I can deploy a whole new instance with this application cookbook, and then once I'm happy with it, I can change DNS, I can change the load balancer, I can make further changes to make it active. The other very common one, which people are probably more familiar with, is this idea of an external workflow. So an external workflow using a tool like maybe like Capistrano or Fabric or any number of other open source tools that can go do this. One of the powerful things about these workflows is you can target specific nodes. So in Capistrano, it's very common that people might search for say a chef role. Let's say I have a chef role of app node, and in my Capistrano deployment, I can say find all my app nodes and deploy this new version of code to it. That's very common. It's also very common to leverage these tools when you need a multi-step application deployment. So for instance, maybe I'm deploying a new version of my app, but I also require a database migration or a schema change. Chef itself is not going to be very good at that. It's not going to be able to manage that process like while you're doing a deployment. And that's really where you should look at some of these other tools to handle that. So how can we take this idea and this tool chain that I mentioned earlier and extend that to the methodology of an application cookbook? Well, we can actually take almost all the same steps. My application cookbook is still a cookbook. I still want to test it with RuboCop. I still want to test it with Food Critic. I still want to test it with ChefSpec. The big difference now is that maybe I use Test Kitchen, but I specifically tell Test Kitchen, don't delete the server that you just created, right? Normally with Test Kitchen, it's designed as a testing framework. If all the tests pass, it will destroy the virtual machine. But I can tell it not to. And that's important because once I'm talking about an application and not just a service like Apache, when I'm talking about an app, there's more follow-up that needs to happen. So the follow-ups start to become more interesting things like application integration testing. Maybe I have an automated load testing through something like drone.io. Maybe I have an entire user acceptance suite. Maybe I'm leveraging Selenium. These can all be additional jobs in Jenkins that get kicked off after my node is built and converged, right? And then of course the final step is always up to your comfort level, which is do you have an automated merge process or do you have a human merge process, right? And so that's kind of how you could take the same idea that we mentioned before and extend it into your application cookbook. So what about, so let's take the other option, which was the deployment workflow, this sort of like third-party tool to do a deployment workflow. How can I build my tool chain to for these third-party deployment workflows? You leverage the same methodologies. You may not use, you're not going to use RuboCop or Food Critic or any of those things because you're not writing a cookbook. But you could still use Test Kitchen to create a node. Maybe that node, you want to make sure Apache and all of those things are installed. It's going to create a node, but you don't want to destroy the instance, right? And that's your chef workflow. Now, additional Jenkins job might be go execute my deployment, right? Go execute, actually run this Capistrano script just like I would in production. And I'm gonna have this deployed to my a brand new app node that I've provisioned. And then this is where, like I mentioned before, you assuming that was successful, you can then move into your integration test, your load test, your user test, and these are all, there's tons of third-party tools out there for these pieces, and these are going to be very specific to every individual. And then now our final test, again, is a very human or automated final test. It seems like some people have the appetite for automation. Other people still want humans to be involved. And so, sorry to make you guys take one more poll, but we're going to do one more. This is just interesting statistics for everybody. But I want to see, if you feel like, you're doing this stuff already. Is this something that, like everything that we've talked about, something that you would be willing to accept help with, right? This is very specifically what my team and what Rackspace is trying to do is help customers run infrastructure. And help customers run infrastructure since the cloud has been evolved and new ways to run. We're just going to let this responses go for just a few more seconds. All right, let's move on to the next slide. And then, of course, if you were interested in it, feel free to give us your name, number, any contacts, anything like that.
So this is Cameron again, the host of it. We have kind of gone through a lot of material, and I know there were some great questions asked. As some of those who are interested in talking about this further with our team here, of course, feel free to provide your information. For those that don't, no need to. But I do want to go ahead and spend some time answering questions and having Ryan and Kyle both be able to address anything that's on your mind, either from the presentation or outside of it. So we've got plenty of time to go through that. Continue to ask questions. So again, we have moderators who are available to go and answer questions, but we're going to take some live Q&A. So if you have any questions, go ahead and type them in the chat box, and we'll go ahead and start addressing some of them. First question that I wanted to address that seems to be a trend is, are there going to be slides available or a recording of the webinar? Just to let everybody know, we will send this out. So if you have attended today, or if you had a colleague or a friend who registered but was not able to, we will send those out. So be on the lookout for a full recording of this webinar. But for more detailed questions, let's start with probably one of my favorite, which was the reference around Die Hard. Kyle, if you can touch, what was the reference around Die Hard again? Can you just talk through that a little bit?
Right. So I don't know how many of you, I'm going to defer over to XKCD, but how many of you have seen that sysadmin comic where the guys think they're dealing with this hotshot action star, but it's actually just a sysadmin muttering about uptime? I know there have been times when, even within the last week, or even though I had infrastructure that was managed with SaltStack and we had a great state, something broke stuff, and I still had to log in and figure out why was our deployment borking. And in those moments, you kind of get filled with adrenaline.
I mean, I think that there's a big shift in mentality over the last 5 years, really since the cloud has come of age, but really the last decade, which has gone from sysadmins as being very firefighter focused, putting out fires, moving into this more proactive model where you really should plan ahead, and things like automation help that, right? And planning ahead and essentially not getting yourself into fires, right? That's the whole idea of testing. Both testing your application and testing your infrastructure is the whole idea of not getting into fires. I mean, everyone will have an app crash, everyone will have a bug, everyone will have a provider go down. Those things are a lot harder to deal with, but the moment you introduce a bug into your own app, like, you should catch that before it gets deployed, right? There's no reason why you should be putting out those types of fires in the middle of the night.
Yeah, so great. I think the reference was awesome, and some of that detail is great to share. So you all might have noticed we flipped the slide. Just want to keep this slide up here in case any of you all do want, again, to ask other questions or have comments. Feel free to put it in there or in the chat box. We'll try to address them. So continue on the next question. There was a lot of talk about, you guys commented a lot about Chef, and there were some questions about, is this the concepts you were talking about only useful for Chef? There's some people on the line talking about how they're using, SaltStack or something else. Can you guys touch a little bit about Chef versus other platforms?
So I've used Chef, Ansible, and SaltStack, and I have a personal opinion on each one. Some of the Chef, tools are built up a lot better right now than, say, Ansible or SaltStack, at least for like all the food critic, the linting, the Burke Shelf stuff.
Which is really a sign of maturity, right? Puppet and Chef have been around. Puppet and Chef have been around for a number of years, and Salt and Ansible really are kind of the new kids.
Yeah, and I'm really happy with Ansible. Actually, all my deployments right now are Ansible or Salt. I haven't been doing any Chef work. That's all right.
So these tools are very specific to Chef, absolutely. Actually, a number of them will work with Puppet as well, due to its Ruby DSL. The Chef spec won't, but Rubocop will, Rake will, I believe Test Kitchen will actually. Chef spec won't work for it, but there's most likely like a Puppet linter out there. The Ansible and Salt have different workflows, and I don't believe, like I said, they're relatively young. I don't believe people are testing that their playbooks or their salt states quite like this. But what you could do is still leverage the same ideas. Let's say with Ansible, you use the Ansible orchestration engine to actually maybe use it to spin up a node. You could still try and leverage something like server spec. Oh, did I mess up my role or my playbook? Did I forget to enable Apache on startup? Like, that stuff still applies to all of these languages. Like Kyle said, Chef and Puppet, have been around longer. They have better tooling right now. I would fully expect that Salt and Ansible get some of that tooling very soon.
Following up on that point, there was kind of some commentary about, why is Rackspace so heavy with Chef versus Puppet specifically? Can you guys talk a little bit about that?
So Rackspace is actually internally using all four of the big ones.
I don't know if anybody's using CF Engine, though.
No, I don't think anyone's using CF Engine. But all four are used at some point inside this company. We allow our product teams to find what fits best for them. Chef, we found Chef to be, we have a very good relationship with Chef, the company, and we found Chef to do what we need. It's got a very good community around it. It's got a lot of cookbooks already written that you don't necessarily have to write yourselves. It's extremely flexible, and we have customers. One of the unique things about Rackspace is we're not just a Python shop or a Ruby shop or a Java shop, right? We have customers running everything, and so we need something that's flexible enough to handle that. But like I said, all four are in use at this company.
I think that is great. I'm sure there's more questions on that. So if you want some more detailed answers on that, feel free to go ahead and continue asking. But
I know at least one of the ones that we probably should address, but I've seen come up a few times, which is people that are doing Windows and .NET deployments. Is your team currently supporting Windows deployments?
So our team is not currently supporting Windows. We're a Linux-only shop at the moment. Part of that is due to a lot of these tools don't have they work on Windows, but they don't. I wouldn't necessarily call them production stable or ready to go. I know that there are people on the bleeding edge using them, but we're still investigating them as a team.
So like right now, I'm helping some open source projects do their builds on Windows, and so those will happen automatically, and then they'll post the build. But it does require a little bit more setup. Linux, for better or worse, is definitely more suited to the DevOps tools. I don't know what Microsoft is coming along with, but PowerShell does give you a lot of flexibility to do some things, but you don't necessarily get the idempotency that you want out of the DevOps tools. Ansible has a Windows mode. Chef can do Windows things. People have been doing it, but I don't have as much experience with it.
Yeah.
And I think one of the points also to add to that is there's some questions around the service that you all provide here at Rackspace. And so while Windows is not supported today, those that are using Linux, how can they understand a little bit more about the services that Rackspace provides today?
Well, I don't know if we can provide the link, but there's definitely a landing page for our team on rackspace.com. It's rackspace.com/DevOps, and it should provide a good overview of what our team does and what technologies we support. But what it comes down to is we have a team of, we call them DevOps engineers whose sole job is to focus on automation all day. That's what they do every day. And the idea is to become experts in it, right? And we have a lot of customers with a lot of deployments, and we see the good, we see the bad. We constantly add features, evolve. It's something that Rackspace has been really good at over the last 10 years and we've been experts at Linux and Windows, support, and we're evolving that to the new tools now, right? And so our team will actually essentially reverse engineer is a strong word, but we'll gather your requirements and we'll build out an automated infrastructure that matches your application. I mean, that's ultimately what our team is trying to do for customers.
And I think to add to that a little more, some of the questions were around kind of CI is most of the stuff that you all reviewed and partly what you do, mostly around server environment and config management, or does it also include application deployment?
So the answer is both. Server environment and config management is absolutely, the bulk of it. But when you think about config management, when I'm deploying an app node or a node that has an application on it, I have to get that code, right? So for all of our customers, we'll do like the initial application deployment, and then every customer has a different way of deploying their app. A few are using Capistrano, a few are using Knife, right? So there are different ways to attack that problem that works best for that company. So the answer is both, but it's very strong in the config management world.
So what Ryan presented was certainly an opinionated piece on how to do an application deployment. When I'm doing application deployments with SaltStack right now, the application is part of the states. I pull in other states for monitoring and whatnot, but the application gets deployed right then. And I actually started off with Fabric, so I'm still going back to Fabric to even kick off the deployment. I make sure to rotate through the load balancers, do the high state on the nodes, run the tests. I say run the tests and all this, but it's actually all one line, one command on Fabric. But it's Salt underneath that.
I was going to say, Kyle mentioned something that I don't think a lot of people think about. Like going beyond server management, like we and application deployment even, we actually take it to the next level, which is like monitoring, for instance, right? So we actually we do monitoring through Chef, meaning that when I deploy an app node, all of our monitoring is configured in Chef so that anytime I deploy an app node, all monitoring for that app node will always be the same as every other app node, whatever that might be, right? I might be monitoring a service, I might be monitoring load, whatever it might be. We put that in our Chef stuff as well. So we actually go further than just basic Linux config management or application deployment. We go into like the full on. Kind of our motto is like if a human has to touch it after the go button, like we've messed up. Like we really want a human not involved once a new server is kicked off.
Ryan and Kyle, there's a lot of attendees who I think are familiar with this space. There's also a lot, though, who are not. And some are asking questions around what is a good way to think about starting if you're starting from nothing? So, and some of the questions are, should I look at Ansible versus Chef? Can you guys touch a little bit on your perspective of how to approach this for someone who doesn't do it today?
So I have a favorite tutorial for Chef, if you guys want me to post that. That was by the guy that also wrote Burkshelf, or I guess, so Jamie Hannaford. I'll post that link. As far as picking any one of them, the joke answer is yes, because you should just go with one. It doesn't take too long to get started with Ansible. SaltStack, in my opinion, takes a little bit more time to understand the terminology and get configured, but is really useful when you have a really big deployment and you know you're going to have tens of thousands of nodes.
Yeah, I would agree. Ansible certainly is the smallest learning curve out of all of them. Ansible and Salt were really designed around some of the limitations of Chef and Puppet. Chef and Puppet learning curves are certainly much higher, but they are extremely flexible tools, right? I mean, you can do anything with them. So much like Kyle said, the big thing is honestly just review all four of them, find which one you think makes sense, and then just get started. If you're really looking to do it yourself, right? If you're not looking to do it yourself, come talk to us. But if you are, just doing one is absolutely better than doing none, right?
Yeah, and kind of building on the concepts of simple, I want to start small, how complex one can you guys go, but also should people think about when they think of CI? The specific question around here is, can you help manage complicated configurations like database replications, for example?
Yes, and we do. We do help manage database replication. There's a number of technologies we support that are using, replication, and it's certainly something that our team can help with. Our entire team has a completely Linux operations background, and so those things are not foreign to us.
Perfect. And I know that Kyle is posting some links, and I think that just to comment on some of the commentary I see, some are asking for tutorials about how to get started with this. So do you guys have any other commentary about how someone else would think about beyond the stuff that Kyle's posting?
So I don't think our team has posted a public tutorial, but certainly like Chef has learnchef.com, right? That is available. Ansible has its set of tutorials. There's a lot of very public ones, and there's some very good blogs that do it better than any of the companies do, that describe it in really real terms. So they're certainly out there, and we can try and post some and provide them as links too, as well.
That's perfect. Yeah, and we'll try to get some of those questions out as well in the follow-up email when we send out the recording for those that would like those links in the future. To dive into some more detailed questions, and we've got a little bit more time, so continue asking questions. If you have any, we'll be sure to go ahead and try to address as many as we can here, and any that we can't, we'll follow up with you directly. But
I was going to say, someone mentioned blog posts. There is a DevOps blog. It's devops.rackspace.com. Those are from all kinds of texts inside of Rackspace, and it's things about the cloud, things about automation, things about application deployment. I mean, anything that's kind of in this sort of DevOps realm really gets put up there from Rackspace. I highly recommend people have a look at it. Someone did mention, I see a question here about, it seems like a lot of work spinning up a cloud server on every code deploy. It seems like a lot of work if you're used to doing that by hand. It's absolutely a ton of work. It's not so much work though if you're letting a system do it, right? I can't even imagine how many cloud instances we've stood up and destroyed in the last 6 months. I mean, it's got to be in the hundreds. Every cookbook might spin up 10 instances to get fully tested because we have to test. Our team has to test Ubuntu, CentOS, Debian, Red Hat. So it's definitely a lot of, it takes time, but it's no more work on us as a tech. There are some people really starting to play around with some really neat technologies like Docker to do this even faster, and containers to do it faster than actual virtual machines. So there's kind of an emerging trend there, but it's extremely young and bleeding edge.
And on that point, I think one of the questions was, do you all use Cloud Init at all to go ahead and do this, or is it mostly Chef? I think it was kind of along the same lines.
Right. So Cloud init, all the Rackspace Cloud Linux images support Cloud init, and we will use Cloud init to help bootstrap nodes, with things like orchestration through the Heat or autoscale. Like Cloud init is really the only way to bootstrap Chef in those tools. So Cloud init is absolutely prevalent. We don't use Cloud init for config management though. Cloud init can do some of those things. It can run arbitrary commands. We don't really do that. We use Cloud init to essentially to make Chef go, right?
And kind of go to more of the detailed questions. There was a question about, I believe it was Ryan, your statement in the presentation around how they deploy the cloud servers. So the question is around, you talked about deploying to a new machine and then using a switchover in the load balancer to point from the old to the new instance. Is that the recommended method that you all usually go through?
There's once you have, and this becomes sort of a per customer basis. People feel differently about this. Once you have the cloud, once you have API-driven infrastructure, anything's possible, right? So, like really advanced companies might actually create new load balancers, right, and throw all of their new app nodes behind a brand new load balancer and cut over DNS. A lot of our current customers aren't taking that step. I mean, that's definitely a level of automation maturity that I think most companies don't get to or aren't there yet. A lot of our customers, we'll spin up an app node and connect it to the same load balancer, and then they will, an existing load balancer, but it's certainly an option, right?
That's perfect. And I think another question tied somewhat to it, but is how do you set up the tool chain itself? Do you guys use cookbooks to deploy all these tools?
We actually do, and that starts to become very inceptionist, right? So we have a Chef cookbook to deploy our Jenkins node with all of the Ruby gems needed to run Chef on Jenkins. So we actually do use Chef to deploy our tool chain and make sure all the right versions are installed. Yes. So yeah. We do.
Yeah, we do the same thing when we use Ansible playbooks to deploy our Jenkins, as well as, put new plugins on them and everything else.
I will say, if you've never messed with Jenkins, maybe you've only heard of Jenkins, and you're interested in playing around with it, the Rackspace control panel, there's a thing called Rackspace deployments. And there's a Jenkins option in there, and you can actually choose that, set some options, and Rackspace deployments will give you a Jenkins deployment that you can play with, right? And if you don't like it, you can destroy it, but it'll let you get started. And then the other option is Travis. If you're using GitHub, look into Travis CI. It's extremely simple to get going with that, to get going with Travis.
There's some who are curious about, Ryan, Kyle, your team and kind of what eating your own dog food might look like. So, is everything that you all do public or private? What is the way that people should think about the work that you're doing?
Absolutely. So I don't know if we provided the link.
We'll get the link.
Yeah. Everything our team does that is reusable, generic, and is not customer specific is absolutely open source, is absolutely available for community consumption. All of our cookbooks are building blocks, if you will, things like Apache, Nginx, MySQL. All of those cookbooks are open source. Now, of course, anything that's customer specific and is very application oriented, that's not public, right? Because that's only for those customers. But the building blocks to deploy a Ruby on Rails app is not specific to any one customer. It's just the app itself is specific. So it is.
I think it's worth touching on why you guys went your own route for doing your own cookbooks instead of just contributing back to upstream and kind of the difficulty there.
Yeah. So with Chef, one of the things I mentioned earlier was there's a ton of community cookbooks out there to get started. If I need a cookbook to deploy Jenkins or a cookbook to deploy Apache or Nginx, they already exist. Someone's already written them. One of the issues we found, though, was that having all these cookbooks are great, but there's not a lot of consistency between them. They're written by different people, different companies. They may have testing, they may not have testing, they may have different types of testing. They may support operating systems that some support Ubuntu, some support Red Hat. And so we said that we have to get consistent with our cookbooks, the ones that are powering our customers' infrastructure. And so we've really been driving this idea of consistency and some advanced methodologies in our cookbooks. And all of that is available on GitHub. It was posted in the chat. There's actually a contributing repository in there that lists all of our guidelines, right? What sort of things do we want to adhere to with our cookbooks? And they're always available for anyone to help make changes with, fork them, et cetera.
There's a couple questions that are around testing specifically, and the first question that I see here is around the fact that you all mentioned unit test coverage, and they're curious how you're measuring the coverage for that.
So at least for Python open source projects, I'll use Coverall. Each language has its own tool for setting up coverage, and sometimes you end up having to roll your own, or there's already some open source project that you can use. So yeah.
Yeah, for Chef, with Chef Spec, there's a coverage mode. It's still in beta, and they warn you that it's still in beta. But there is a coverage mode in Chef Spec that'll tell you, what resources, how are you testing that you've called. So, for instance, if I lay down a template in Chef and I don't have a Chef Spec test for that template, it'll warn me.
I think you touched on it there but the question followed up a little more detail. Puppet versus Chef. Does Puppet get the same coverage as Chef in regards to testing?
Unfortunately, I'm definitely not the person who can answer that. I don't know the Puppet ecosystem nearly as well as Chef.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
So for Salt, I've had to do some other things to use Travis with Salt. I'll post a link to the little blog post about it. I set up the entire node on Travis, which is kind of cheating because it's not really the environment. But at the very, at a minimal basis here, I get YAML validation, and I can check to make sure that a lot of the pillar data and everything else gets filled in.
I see someone mention that coverage doesn't always ensure quality, and absolutely not. You're absolutely correct. That goes back to Kyle's slide early on, which was the slide basically showed that I have 100% test coverage, but if you look at the picture, the letters, you got circles and square blocks or the wrong letter here. Absolutely, coverage is not the same thing as quality. I know that there's a lot of discussions out there, but having coverage is better than having absolutely nothing at all, right? And that's where humans come in. Measuring quality is very difficult to do. And it's something that humans are good at, but it's something that machines are not good at. And I think he just is showing that picture. I mean, the idea that some of these letters are just slammed into the wrong place. I think any developer here that's on this will know that they've done this at least once, right? Probably more like 100 times. It happens. It absolutely happens.
Yeah, I think that's a great segue, too, about the power of what you all bring to the table with the DevOps Automation Service. And there's a couple questions, and I know we've got about 5 minutes left, so I want to make sure we address them. Around your service that you all are supporting here at Rackspace, one of the questions was just getting understanding of really what configuration management frameworks you all support within the service.
Yeah, so currently it is just Chef, but we are investigating other ones as well.
And kind of building on that, I think that customers and potential customers, of course, are always curious about, how you all will choose those future ones. Can you give us a little insight? Is it based off of request? Do you guys have a plan in place right now? How does that look?
Yeah, it's absolutely based off of feedback from customers. Like I said, Rackspace is all four are engaged here at Rackspace. So there's a lot of discussions internally about, which one's better and why, and we take that, we hear that We hear it from customers as well. Customers that we've talked to that are interested in our offering may say, oh, well, I'd really like to use SaltStack, or I'd really like to use Ansible. Right, so that direct feedback goes into our investigatory stuff. But what we, ultimately what it comes down to is like, what tool can our team actually do what we need to do for customers, right? And so that's what we really look at is what's the model, how do we do it, how do we do it in a reusable fashion, how do we do it and make sure we're not going to break anything, right? One of the big things that our team does for customers that I haven't really mentioned is any of the specific cookbooks to deploy applications or drive their infrastructure, we actually share that with customers. So we use private Git repositories, and we'll share that with customers. So customers have direct insight and can even make changes to the cookbooks that we've written specifically for them, right? And whenever we support another config management system, we're going to do the same thing, right?
I think that's a great overview. And one of the last questions on the service, and if we have time, we'll answer one other detailed question, but on the service is around how to think about pricing. Can you touch a little bit about what the pricing model looks like for this service at a high level?
Sure. So the pricing that we have in place right now is this is it's a completely managed service. So not only are we building out all the automation, but we support all of the services that are running. So for example, if we build out Redis cookbooks for a customer and automate their Redis instances, we're also fully managing those 24/7 on an ongoing basis for performance management, patching, and so on. So the way the pricing is set up for this service is that we look at a price of a monthly fee for the managed services, which is around the range of $5,000 a month. And what you get for that is basically a team of DevOps engineers who are automating your environment and testing, like we mentioned today, on an ongoing basis.
I think that's a great overview, and I think just to add to that, if anyone wants to learn more about that or how we can go ahead and help potentially your business, again, we'll follow up with you. Just go ahead and comment either here in the Q&A or on the slide that we'll put back up that allows you to go ahead and give us your contact information. We've got time for just one more question, I think, and so any questions that we did not answer on here, we'll be sure to go ahead and address in a follow-up email with you, or feel free to post it here, and we'll address those. But there's one interesting question I want to make sure we go and answer. And so, Kyle and Ryan, I'll just read it as it is. How do you all handle private data, such as SSH keys or certificates, passwords? Do you put that into Ansible or Chef files, since that stuff isn't in Git repos?
So for Ansible, I wouldn't put it in your Git repo. If you do store it in a file, you would end up putting it in a Git ignored file so that it doesn't get checked into the repo, or have it as an environment variable that gets read in, but I definitely wouldn't put it out on the web, whether public or private.
I mean, that's one of those items that we look at, right? So again, looking at the existing things between Chef and Puppet haven't been around for many years. They have some solutions for that. So Chef has encrypted data bags for things that are really, really secret. I'm sure Puppet has a solution, but things like Salt and Ansible may not have a solution yet. So we definitely take those into account. Things like keys, we'll manage public keys, but private keys, we don't manage those in Chef. Just because of what was mentioned was around security. There are some, Rackspace is working on sort of a secret as a service. It's basically an OpenStack project to really provide security around sensitive items, and so there's a lot of services that we're looking at for doing that.
That's great. So thank you, Ryan and Kyle, for answering all those questions and sharing some of the knowledge and best practices that you all have gained as DevOps engineers here at Rackspace. I want to also thank all of our participants who came and joined us today for today's presentation. We really enjoyed being able to go ahead and answer all those questions and some of your feedback, so thank you for doing that. There will be more to come in the future, so stay tuned for other webinars along these lines. In the meantime, though, we will send you a recording of this webinar that you'll be able to get by email, and again, we'll send it to those that registered and everyone who attended with us today. So thank you again for joining us, and from all of us here at Rackspace, we'll chat with you soon again.